So the fact that now here we are, this many years later, over 2 years later, and there is a special counsel, and there has been a president indicted, and now his big lie lawyer-in-chief, Giuliani, has gone in there for proffer, is a significant development. We're joined by someone who knows his way around exactly these kind of investigations, Watergate prosecutor Nick Akermann, who we call on big nights like this. As this news was breaking, the Times says it was as recently as last week. NBC has also confirmed it. We're learning about it today. Nick, what does it mean to you that Jack Smith got Giuliani to sit down?
This is absolutely huge, Ari. This means that they have evidence, that they have somehow convinced Bob Costello, who's Rudy's lawyer, to bring him in for a proffer agreement. And I think what we have to look at here, I mean, one plausible explanation is that Mark Meadows had testified in the grand jury recently. And Mark Meadows was really kind of the ringmaster for Donald Trump, dealing with all the people across the spectrum, from Rudy to Roger Stone to General Flynn to Steve Bannon. And I have to believe that they came up with enough evidence on Rudy that he is concerned enough that he went in and realized that he has to play let's make a deal. And the way this works—
Let's reflect right there on the point. Let's reflect on what you're breaking down, Nick, because we hear about people going in, and obviously you can go in and be less than cooperative, or you can be put before the grand jury. We've heard about that. People have heard as we've monitored all this. You're emphasizing the distinction that because it's a proffer, because it was a voluntary sit-down, that means you perceive Smith and his team as having pressured and moved Giuliani, moved him towards the DOJ?
Absolutely. He didn't go in there willy-nilly, just happy to volunteer because he's suddenly a good citizen. I think they really came up with more evidence, basically presented that to his lawyer, Robert Costello. I know Robert Costello. We were in the U.S. Attorney's Office together. He's a good lawyer, and he would know when it would be appropriate to bring Rudy Giuliani in for a proffer agreement. Now, to break it down a little bit further, just to explain what a proffer agreement is, it's also known as a queen for a day agreement. What it means is that what you say will not be used against you unless you wind up lying. Then all bets are off, and then you can be indicted or charged with perjury. But it also has as part of it that any statements that you make that lead to other evidence can thereafter be used by the prosecution. So in a sense, Rudy Giuliani really has to bare his soul and has to be truthful because he has some idea of what Mark Meadows has said. He has some idea of what other people have said. He was right smack dab in the middle of the big lie and the perpetration of that lie in 30, 40 different courts around the country, where he basically got tossed out every single time.
So let's dive into that. Let's dive into that in plain English, Nick, because that could scare other people that he is talking about, whether it's a Eastman or a Sidney Powell. It could scare Donald Trump himself. Let's take one of what I told viewers is one of the arrows, one of the plots they didn't finish, but that may have involved crimes, which was that there were people reportedly trying to commit a military coup. You know, we just followed a Russian version of that. They were trying to do that here. And no one has yet been indicted for that, Nick, but as you know, that's a serious thing. Giuliani reportedly through his people tried to tell the January 6th committee that he warned against that. He never cooperated fully, but there was reporting that he warned against that. You're saying that Jack Smith could sit him down now and say, as long as you tell the truth, you can give us more detail about how that was going to work. How far did it go? Did anyone call the Pentagon? Sidney Powell was allegedly appointed to that role. Did that intersect with any of these would-be, wannabe, self-proclaimed militia-style military veteran tough guys, some of whom have now been convicted on Jan 6? You're saying to us tonight that this means Giuliani can actually say that stuff with some protection for himself, and Jack Smith can then use it?
Yes, he can absolutely use it. And the question will be what the end game is for Rudy Giuliani. Is he going to have to plead guilty to some kind of lesser crime? or are they going to give him immunity? I kind of think they're going to insist on a lesser crime. And the military coup that you're talking about was in December of 2020, when they were talking about actually putting the military out there and seizing the voting machines. What Giuliani may know something about is what stopped that, which was, I believe, there was talk about them getting this information through a different source. And obviously, as it turns out, we learned that one of those different sources was from Coffee County in Georgia, where they actually took out data and used that, and they took data out of another county in Michigan.
And I'm only jumping in. I want you to finish your point, but the arrows I mentioned is that military plot is on our screen here. Viewers can see that would be illegal no matter what. That's why it's red. We'll put this in full, Nick. When you look closely at this, what you'll also see is when that military plot failed. So you see military seized voting machines. It stopped, as you mentioned accurately, in December. It was that very night when they pulled back on that, when allegedly Trump was warned, you will be in prison for this alone if you keep going. That night, he sent out the first public call for Jan 6. That's why the January 6 sabotage arrow begins when the military ends. And so do you think Smith could also, through this Giuliani proffer, say what else was going on that night? You're already talking about using force in a way. That would be government force. Now you're talking about Jan 6. Who was going to be called up? Why was it that same night? Why did you say it'll be wild? Why was Navarro's name in the tweet? How would that all work, Nick?
Oh, sure. I mean, he'd be asked about all of those. In fact, you recall when Cassidy Hutchinson testified before the January 6th committee, she and Giuliani had walked out one evening before that, where Rudy said to her, boy, it's going to be wild, Cassidy. Are you excited about what's going to happen on January 6th? I mean, he was smack dab in the middle of everything. If he comes totally clean here, Donald Trump's in big trouble, John Eastman's in big trouble, right down the line, possibly General Flynn, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon. I mean, particularly, I don't think they've had anybody who has been in place in that Willard Hotel war room. And what was going on there, and what was the connection between people in that war room and the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers? That's what we want to find out, and that's what Jack Smith is going in for.